David Brody is CBN's chief political analyst. David, I want to ask you something. You've been around the president, so have I. I really admire what he's doing. Why do you think he insults people the way he does?
Pat, it's really part of his New York brawling attitude, and it honestly really hasn't served him well at all. And what I mean by that is that even though he's president of the United States because he has a vibrant Twitter feed, he doesn't quite have the filter as it relates to some of the kindergarten antics that go on as part of that Twitter feed. And we saw it the other day when he called Rex Tillerson, his former Secretary of State, dumb as a rock, and question his mental capacity. Look, Pat, ultimately, the analysis here is pretty simple. Donald Trump received 81% of the white evangelical vote in 2016. Let's remember, not all those folks were enthusiastic about him. A lot of them held their nose and voted for Donald Trump. It's those fence-sitting evangelicals, the ones that are tired of the insults, that he has to worry about in 2020. If they drop off in 2020, that number could be at 79%, and he will lose the White House. I don't think there's any question about it.
Well, who would, look what happened to the Attorney General. I know he was not pleased with what had happened, but at the same time, you do stuff quietly. You don't go public with insults. And I wonder who would want that job of, Mark Meadows thought he might do it, but Trump goes after people. Have you ever seen a leader who insulted the people who worked for him the way he does?
No, I haven't. And, the Trump administration and Donald Trump himself, I'm sure, would push back and say, well, it's worked pretty well for me. I'm president of the United States and I got billions of dollars, but at what cost? I mean, at some point, the childish games really do need to end, and it could cost him politically, as I said. Look, in terms of the chief of staff, I mean, let's be honest here. Nick Ayers could have had that job. But I think part of the calculus here is, why are you going to potentially tarnish a really good reputation that he has by potentially being called dumb as a rock in a year and a half? I mean, the guy has some real future ahead of him. So I think that was part of it, at least. And in terms of who's out there right now, I mean, you have Mark Meadows. He would be obviously a solid choice as it relates to being a conservative Christian who's a very conservative member of the House Freedom Caucus. That would work. But ultimately, let's be honest, Pat, the chief of staff for Donald Trump is Donald Trump. He is his own chief of staff, and maybe he should just come out and announce that he's going to announce himself as chief of staff.
Well, do you reckon his daughter, maybe he could put Ivanka in? It's kind of tough to fire your daughter. What do you think?
Well, it would be definitely a provocative move, but then again, provocative and Donald Trump do run in the same sentence. I think he'd get a lot of pushback for that. Having said that, he wouldn't care about it at all. Though you make an interesting point about Ivanka. Ivanka actually has the entire skill set that you need to be a successful chief of staff. I mean, obviously loyal, close to the family. She's part of the family. But beyond that, telegenic, someone that's articulate, that can speak his message and understand him at his core. It is very hard to really be able to find someone like that. Mark Meadows might be pretty good because he's very good on television, and Donald Trump likes folks that are good on television.
Well, one guy that's under consideration is the former governor of New Jersey. I know he has had his problems, but he understands how to run a state, and that, there's an awful lot of administration involved in being chief of staff.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that one's going to work, Pat. I know his name, Christie, has been bandied about. The problem there is Chris Christie is a pretty type A type personality guy. I mean, he is pretty vociferous. Donald Trump vociferous as well. You put two of them in a room, I'm not sure how long that's going to last. I think also part of it, too, is, let's be honest as to why John Kelly didn't quite work out. Look, this is a Marine four-star general that has a certain way of doing things, and Donald Trump likes to freelance, as we know. And so you put those two together, and that is a tough recipe as well. And look, as it relates to John Kelly, it's just interesting to see how he has tried to maneuver all of this. I just think that ultimately that just was not a good fit at all.
What do you think about Trump's relationship with suburban women? Do you think he can win them back? Because, I mean, he's got the base, but the base isn't enough to win an election.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an open question right now, Pat, and they're going to have to do a lot on that front. I know Ivanka Trump and is going to be doing quite a bit in 2020 as it relates to the Family Paid Medical Leave Act, so there will be part of that. But truth be told, that is a major vacuum that they're going to have to fill to be able to win in 2020, and the Democrats are sure going to take advantage of that, Pat.
You think he's concerned? You know, Adam Schiff can't think of enough nasty things to say, and now this Nadler's coming on board, and these Democrat committee chairmen are going to go after him for indictment. Do you think he's in any way worried about any of that?
Well, I think there's no doubt there's worry inside the White House about potential impeachment. Look, all it takes, Pat, as you know, in the House, once those articles of impeachment are introduced, all it takes is a simple majority to pass, let's just say, one of the articles of impeachment, depending on what they end up doing. So you just need a simple majority. But for folks out there that, you know, hear impeachment and go, oh, my goodness, he's been impeached. Let's remember what really impeachment means in the House. It just means basically that the House has indicted the president. And then, of course, after an indictment would come a trial, and that would be in the Senate. And at this point, there doesn't seem to be any way that President Trump would actually be removed from office. As a matter of fact, there has been no president ever in the history of the United States who has been removed from office. Two presidents, Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton, impeached, but never removed from office. So, look, they need 67 out of 100 senators to impeach this president. Republicans have 53 senators, and unless there's some sort of smoking gun, or as Donald Trump would call it, a smocking gun, then I don't think that's going to fly.
Well, the electorate knew what they were getting, didn't they? I mean, there wasn't any secret about the kind of man he was, but the people really liked him, and he's done a superb job as president. That's what it's amazing that those accomplishments are getting buried under some of these superficial things.
You know, Pat, we spent a lot of time talking about Donald Trump's insults on Twitter and all of that. But let's remember, as you said, actions do speak louder than words. And I think in this case, the saving grace for Donald Trump is that the actions have come fast and furious, especially when it relates to evangelicals. That look, at some point, it appears that a lot of these folks that are tired of the insults might just say, hey, actions speak louder than words, and actions over insults any day of the week. And as a matter of fact, there was one evangelical on Twitter that tweeted me and said they'll take insults over abortions any day of the week. And so that's the point. Bottom line is Donald Trump is an imperfect person. But you know what? God uses imperfect people, as we've talked about, to accomplish his perfect will. So a lot of evangelicals are taking the macro view, even though that micro insulting view on Twitter can look downright nasty at times.
When you look at especially with judges, that was the thing that has stood out, that he has picked absolutely marvelous judges, and he's got a whole lot of more that are going to get confirmed before the session is over. What do you think?
Well, that's right. He's got the two pillars, Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch, standing pretty strong, though we don't need to get into this right now. But there was an issue yesterday at the Supreme Court where they didn't take a case, and Brett Kavanaugh actually sided with the liberals on the court on an abortion issue. Long story. But the bottom line is it hasn't started off too well for Brett Kavanaugh. We'll see how that goes. But indeed, he's got the two pillars. But beyond that, all of those circuit court judges, that is the key. Because remember, every time we hear about how Donald Trump had a judge stop him from enforcing either immigration law or the issue as it relates to folks coming in, refugees from from other countries, excuse me. You know, that's always one of those federal judges, right? Those circuit court judges. Well, Donald Trump has approved more of those, or the Senate has approved more of Donald Trump's judges than any president. It's quite a clip. So that's a big one.